Hi, this is Tim and Joel. Welcome to Midwest Hunting and Outdoors by Two Dumbasses,
a podcast about the outdoors, hunting,
and being a steward of the land.
I want to dial us back just a little bit. Now, back to programs. You talked about CP 42, CP 25. The one thing I would say is I think our state of Iowa, does a great job with programs and working with landowners. I think one area of opportunity is, well, you really got to do your research to try to figure all that out. I mean, it's available, and when you go up to the offices, the people are super friendly, but I mean, a lot of people don't even know where to go. I'm a new person. I don't have any. Land's new to me. So where do I go to first off talk to people about programs, and then second of all, what are some of the programs that you personally deal with?
Right.
I think that would be good for our listeners to talk about. And then you keep bringing up about cost share. I think it'd be important to talk, what's that mean?
Okay. So normally what I do, we kind of talked about it, but I'll just reiterate it. When I go out to the farm, we're looking around and we're talking about practices. We're looking at that edge. We'll revisit the edge, and a landowner will say, should I be doing something? And I'll say, yeah, we got this great practice called edge feathering, and I kind of explain it with my, my props and stuff, and they're like, well, who does that? And can I hire a contractor? And I'm like, yeah, do you want to talk about cost share? And they're like, gosh, what's cost share? And I'm like, well, there's assistance for this. There's programs out there through the federal government, through the state. And they're like, well, what are those? And I'll say, well, maybe if we have time, we can run up to the Natural Resources Conservation Service office in town. Maybe they know about them already. Maybe they've got CRP, but they didn't realize there were programs like, I'll just dive into programs like EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. EQIP is available to landowners that qualify. There's rules and regulations. You find out in the office whether you qualify. And if you can think about it, if you can dream about it, there's a practice you can do. Whether you want to plant a 2-acre monarch pollinator, great thing for monarchs, a prairie. If you want to edge feather, if you want to plant trees, if you want to do a green browse food plot, there's just a plethora of practices through that. You basically go into the office. Hopefully someone's been in the field already and walked with you, whether it's a Jeremy or a Kevin or a Jason Greach or whoever. And maybe we've already hatched a plan. Maybe we've already written up a little bit of a blurb saying this farm has several thousand feet that could be edge feathered. And that makes it easier on the staff, whether it's the soil conservationist, the district conservationist. If you kind of come in with, I'll say, ammunition, you've pre-thought it out. Maybe you've had that person in the field to help you out. If not, no big deal. They'll still work with you, and they'll work with you very well. But it's nice to kind of know what's out there as far as programs. Like I said, that EQIP program has really served me well over the years.
Kevin, not to interrupt,
Go
but
ahead.
I am.
Go ahead.
Is it the EQIP, is that a state or a federal or both?
That is a federal program.
Okay.
It's through USDA. It's part of the Farm Bill. There's an allocation. The cool thing about EQIP, and I just love this, is we have a fund for EQIP in Iowa, a pot of money, I'll call it, for ag practices, terraces, waterways, ponds, pasture type practices for our grazers, for our ranchers, farmers in Iowa. And then we have a distinct pot of money just for wildlife, just for doing practices to help out our wildlife in the state of Iowa, which is, to me, awesome. Several $1 million a year gets put into that pot just for wildlife, folks. if you go in and sign up for Equip, let's say you guys were interested, and you sign up, it's ranked. It's a ranking type program. Yep. And it's ranked on several different categories: where you sit in the state, are you in a priority area, and then they call them, NRCS calls it a batching period, where they pull all these applications in, rank them, and if you rank high enough, you get accepted. The great thing about Equip, especially the wildlife part of Equip, is which is what I deal with. I've met very few folks that we've got interested in it that don't get accepted into the program eventually. It may not be the first go around, but a lot of times it is. You may sign up in the summertime, and by fall, NRCS calls and says, hey, you've been accepted to edge feather, or to plant an acre of trees, or to do timber stand improvement. So that's such a big part of what we do as private lands folks. Is if someone's interested, we try to ferret out which program would work best for this landowner. Equip is huge because we know there's always going to be a pretty good chunk of that money coming into Iowa, and it's part of our task as private lands folks to help USDA find those customers and use that money up. So,
and what would be the worst case scenario? Would be zero, right? As far as funding.
Yeah, and I've never seen that in 20 years.
But then what would be the best case? And then, we're using the feathering of edges and things like that as an example. So let's stay with that example.
Yeah.
I go in, hey, you're accepted.
Yep.
What would be kind of the average, help and support from a monetary standpoint? And then what would be the best expected?
I hate to put numbers on it because it kind of pins you down as far as dollar figures, but I'll just because it changes. It changes usually on a yearly basis. But let's just say if you decided to do 10 acres of edge feathering, you would be talking in the thousands of dollars to get help to do that. And maybe you're a person that doesn't like to run the saw. Maybe you're a person that lives in Decorah, or you live in Des Moines and you come recreate on the farm, but you just, maybe you're not able to. Maybe the time, like Joel said, is the or like Tim said, is the factor. So for me, if it's that way, if you don't have time to do it, if you don't choose to do it, then it's part of what I'll do and NRCS will do. They usually have a contractors list right there at the office, contractors that run chainsaws, contractors that plant trees. We'll look at that list, let the landowner look at the list. I usually don't recommend. I usually just say there's lots of good contractors in the county. I'll tell you some of the folks that I've worked with in the past that have used these contractors. Call these contractors up, interview them. That's critical to me. Is don't just choose one person. Call up 3 or 4 on their list and say, could I come look at a tree planting you've done? Or could I look at your edge feathering? That's always so helpful to me, whether it's a contractor, whether it's a seed vendor, whatever. Could I come look at a prairie that you've drilled out on CRP or something like that? So the money is there. Every practice has its own cost share amount on it. And the best thing you can do is to let the NRCS folks know if it's a program through them, what it costs you to get that done, because they'll base a little bit of that on, well, geez, we thought edge feathering should have been this much, and boy, the contractors, maybe it's ramped up, maybe it's more expensive to, maybe chainsaws are more expensive or whatever. It seems like nothing gets cheaper, everything gets more expensive. Yep. But tree plantings would have ground prep, the cost of the trees, herbicide application, running a tree planter. Edge feathering would have so much per acre, so many dollars per acre. And there might be a light edge feathering, a medium edge feathering, and a heavy edge feathering. Knowing what I know over the past 20 years, I always opt for the heavy edge feathering if it demands it, because we get enough rain in southern southeast Iowa that usually our trees grow back very quickly. So
in summary, summarizing a little bit what I heard you say, if we were looking at programs, and jump in if I've missed one, we have edge feathering that you can deal with. Again, I'm excluding the forestry ones.
Right.
We have the Equip. We have a plethora of CRP that could range from grasses to flowers. What else? Am I missing something?
Wetlands under CRP, tree planting practices under CRP. I usually carry it with. I didn't bring it today. If I bring my folder, I usually bring it with, and I'll show landowners this list. Now it's on this huge piece of paper. If you can't find something in the CRP program, and if you qualify, if you can't find something that fits your farm, we're not looking hard enough, because like you said, Tim, there's pollinator practices, there's CP25s. It's called rare and declining habitat. Just to keep up on it is a challenge.
Okay.
Yeah. Trees, grass, water, wetlands. It's amazing what's out there.
The one thing I found, and I got tons of questions that I can ask you. The one thing I've learned, though, through owning our property is that I want to build wildlife habitat, but I can do it and also heal my ground.
Yes.
And it's not an exclusive thing, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to. And so it's important to me as a landowner to leave a legacy for my future generations.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, that the state allows you to do that and build really great habitat, but also heal your ground.
Yeah. Yeah, and we haven't even talked about soils, and I've learned so much about soil health in the last, I'll say, 10 years of my career. We have a area soil scientist in our office, Jason Steele, and we have a great working relationship, and he's even going out now and working with some of the landowners I work with, and even if it's a 2-acre food plot, having him come out and teach alongside the wildlife biologist. It's always fun to do that, because some of the folks that I help do some, food plots and manage their land over around Fairfield where I live, we've went almost exclusively no-till. We've went to cover crops, and 10 years ago I'm like, cover crop, that's just plant oats with your clover, and that was my cover crop, to now doing multiple species cover crops and mixes. And I love what you said, Tim, about healing the soil, because in our past we've abused it. We've abused these resources, and now we're doing those things, planting the prairies, planting the trees. So
I don't think people fully understand. I was at a state of Iowa. Well, first off, before I go there, we talked about all these programs, and then our listeners are across the Midwest, South Dakota, Minnesota, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska. I mean, that's kind of where our niche is, because that's where we reside. It's where our experiences kind of reside.
Right.
As you sit there and you start to think about that, do these programs, are they applicable in all these other states?
Pretty much. I can't speak for other states, but I can tell you EQIP is a nationwide program. Each state gets to set some of their rules. Their state office gets to set some of their rules. CRP is a nationwide program. It all boils down to eligibility. That's why it's so important to work with our partners, at USDA, and to get in that office and work with the Farm Service Agency and say, do I qualify? Do I have a farm number? I think when we started working together, Joel,
I have a farm.
Do I have a farm number, right?
Starts there, right?
It starts there.
Everybody's a number.
What the hell is that?
Yeah. Well, and if you're applying for cost share, if you're applying for these programs, if you don't have a tract and a farm number, they'll go, well, you need to come in. And I think Samantha went to the NRCS, and yeah. So it's all a part of, to me, it's all a part of, I don't want to call it playing a game, but going through the steps. We talk about the steps of managing land. If you want cost share, it takes some steps to go do it. And I tell my customers, don't get frustrated. It's easy to get frustrated. I look at CRP folders all the time. I love going out. I've been working on CRP all summer long. I told you guys earlier, it's busy. It's very busy right now. And it's such a super cool program for where it's been in 30 plus years in Iowa.
So now these programs, just before I move on, these programs for the state of Iowa, but across the nation for that matter, are all administered by NCRS. Is that right?
NRCS, yeah.
NRCS.
Yeah, and it can be that, like, we're so lucky in the state of Iowa to have REAP, Resource Enhancement and Protection. I'm sure Jeremy will touch on that. As far as timber stand improvement, tree plantings, prairie plantings, that was about to sunset here in this last legislative session. I think it was going to sunset in 21, and I think we got it extended. So it's a great program. I've worked on that one for years. That's administered by the state of Iowa, and you can actually go into the NRCS office and work with their staff. Usually, it's the conservation assistant with the conservation districts that takes the application, and then if it's something with forestry, it could be getting the forester out there. It could be getting a Jeremy or one of the other foresters around the state to work with you, design a tree planting plan. If it's something to do with wildlife like a prairie, they may call me and say, hey, how do I design a prairie? How do I get a prairie going? So it's not just, USDA has the biggest part of the programs with CRP and EQIP and CSP. We haven't even talked about that one. There's so many you could talk about, but we also we're very lucky in the DNR to have a program called Prairie Partners. I'd be really not doing a service to people listening and watching to not talk about that program. That's a program we've had for several years where it's strictly cost share, and it's just strictly cost share for native seed. We have 6 vendors in the state of Iowa right now that work with us, native seed dealers and folks that sell seed, native seed. And there's always an acre or 2 or 3 on every farm I've ever been on that people say, what do I do back here in this corner, Kevin? What do I do with this? And you start looking, and it doesn't lay, it's not straight up and down. You could probably put a drill on it or broadcast seed. And I'll say, well, we have this really cool program called Prairie Partners. Basically, I like to call it it's called a voucher for the seed. It's 50% off the seed. I like to call it a seed coupon. And that's basically what it is. They call up the seed dealer and they say, hey, I'd like to plant a pollinator mix, or I'd like to plant a monarch mix, or a grass mix. And could you give me the price? And then whatever the price is, the DNR matches that other 50%. So we don't pay for any of the drill or the herbicide or the mowing. But for people that say, boy, I'd sure like to do a 2-acre bedding area or a 10-acre bedding area, and maybe I don't qualify for anything else. Maybe I do, but your program sounds really cool. How long does it take to get that cost share? As quick as it takes the private land staff to draft up the 2 pieces of paper, you sign a 10-year habitat agreement, and you call and get the price on seed, and I make out the voucher or the coupon, and we go down the road. Yep. And that's cool, very quick.
Yeah, that's good. Good.
Yeah.
Hey, Kevin, just going back, we're tossing acronyms around. Nrcs stands for?
Natural Resources Conservation Service. They're an arm of USDA. Basically, they're a sister agency with Farm Service Agency. If you've ever been in one of their offices, they basically sit across the hall from one another. The Farm Service Agency is basically the contracting arm. They work a lot with the farm programs. They are also in charge of CRP. They're the ones that hold the CRP contracts. And the reason I'm sitting here talking about CRP today and programs is because I sit on the area office staff with NRCS, the natural resources folks. And we've had an agreement for 20 years that DNR staff can sit in their offices, drive their vehicles, get provided a computer. It's been a great, great working relationship. It's been a great partnership. I can't say enough about them. And when you walk into those offices, you always say left or right. Which side? Who do I need to start with? And it can be kind of confusing. I get that. I'm so used to it now that I'll say, well, if you're interested in CRP, we start with the Farm Service Agency, and then you come over to the technical side, the NRCS, the DNR, the Pheasants Forever side, and we're the ones drawing up the seeding plans, talking to them about how to get your CRP established, how to get it ready. Maybe we need to do 2 burn downs. Maybe it was been brome for 30 years and we need to do a herbicide burn down in the fall. And well, do we mow? Do we need to mow? So I get in on a lot of that stuff.
And also, so my first foray into that, putting in burn brakes.
Yeah, the fire brakes.
Fire brakes. I did not do that my first time around, so I'll be counting on you for a little help when that time comes.
Are you looking at me or Kevin?
I'm looking at you.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, that they're a good resource from a consulting perspective on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's. I always tell guys when they're like, I don't know if I should apply for cost share, and I'm like, if you're a taxpayer, you funded that. don't feel bad about applying for cost share. It's all of our cost share. And if your farm needs that type of help, if it needs an edge feathering, if it needs a timber burn, if it needs whatever you're thinking, a monarch plot, a bedding area for whitetails, a nesting area for turkey, pheasant, quail, apply for it. If it's there, apply for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the big message of this whole episode, right?
Yeah.
Is again, tons of support financially and people support.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just gotta shuffle through the red tape and don't be afraid to ask questions and get the right person and talk to people. And there's tons of help out there.
There is. There's all kinds of good resources. We've mentioned a lot of them today. And go in with some, I like to say, since I'm a hunter and you guys are, I always like to say, have some ammunition. I mean, if you can be a little bit prepared when you go in, and maybe you've just talked to me on the phone and say, hey, I hear the CRP sign-up's ending tomorrow. What do I do when I go in there? What are your goals? Are you a pheasant and quail hunter? Are you a deer and turkey hunter? Are you just an enthusiast of all wildlife and you want something kind of general, maybe just a CP 25, with 15 or 20 species? Or if you said, hey, I really want to help the monarchs, we might shuffle you over towards a pollinator or something like that.
Sure.
So yeah, it's incredible the amount of people and programs out there. If you can't find something, if you can't find help, just look a little deeper, dig a little deeper. It's there.
Okay.
Hey, Kevin, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit with you on this question. And it's from a biology standpoint, what would you consider, the largest risk and again, let's just keep it focused to deer and turkeys from a simple standpoint. But from a biological standpoint, what's the biggest risk out there in your mind in the state of Iowa that's hindering the state or lying out there? And you don't have to narrow it down to one, but maybe the top several.
Habitat, quality habitat. Managing the habitat that we have. We are, I think, 48th in the nation in public lands. So a lot of our lands, almost all of our lands are privately owned. Getting folks to, and it hits you when you hear that.
Wow.
What was the number? 40?
I think we're 48th in the nation in public lands. I might be off a place or two, but I'm pretty sure we're in the bottom of the bottom. And so, working in the private lands program, it's obvious to us every day that we're out there, helping folks manage their land, giving them ideas, writing those wildlife plans. So quality habitat, that hits me every day. We have habitat, but is it quality? Sometimes you're looking at 30-plus-year-old CRP that was once very productive. It was brome and alfalfa, and down here now it might be 12 to 14 inches tall, and the alfalfa is gone because of the nature of brome, our cool season grass. And can we make that better? As far as health of wildlife, it's part of it. There's always something going on with the health of wildlife, whether it be EHD, epizootic hemorrhagic disease, which we have outbreaks, it seems like every year with drought pockets around the state. Even in areas we don't have drought, we probably will lose some deer. I get a lot of calls on that. Of course, chronic wasting disease is a big deal in Iowa. We have it in Iowa now. I think there's always a little bit of confusion amongst my customers. I'm lucky enough to get to go help do some chronic wasting disease sampling with the staff from Lake Sajima, the wildlife staff. They allow me to hang out with them for a few days every year and go do that, which you meet a lot of really good hunters that are like, yeah, please come sample our deer. Getting that word out there, guys will say, what's the difference between EHD and CWD? And I'm not a researcher, so I basically tell them, epizootic hemorrhagic disease, or EHD, is pretty cyclic. It comes in, it may be, it was harsh up in central Iowa last year. Maybe it'll be west central with their drought this year. I don't know. And CWD is pretty permanent on the landscape. So, diseases, but habitat to me is usually right up front. It's usually neck and neck with anything else. Good quality, well-managed habitat.
Sounds like a future topic, and we could spend a lot of time on that, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Let's let's stay a little bit more with EHD and CWD, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, in my mind, I kind of link them together, but they're two different types of threats, right?
Right.
Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. For my remedial knowledge, like I said, I'm not a researcher. I always have my, my disclaimer. And I learn from our research biologists all the time. They're a great resource in the state of Iowa, and I reach out to them. I think of EHD as something that's going to start popping up here pretty quickly. Late July, August, we've been lucky. We've been getting rains down here in south central Iowa this year. Usually by this time of year, we're dry. We're usually not droughty, but dry. And we think about those ephemeral pools out in the woods, or we think about those creeks kind of dropping down, and we've got these midges or gnats that hatch out of these mud flats. And, they're biting our deer, and if the deer is susceptible to EHD, they're going to get it, and they're going to get that high temp, and they're going to die. It's hard. I work with a lot of folks, in the counties. This county got hit, Monroe County got hit pretty hard last year. Have a gentleman in the northwest part of the county that just was calling me every week saying what he was finding, and he was telling, the DNR what he was finding. But he was upbeat about it. He's like, I know this is cyclic. I know we're going to go through this. And I always tell folks, deer are pioneering species. If you've got good habitat, they're coming back. Maybe 2 or 3 years before we get them back to where they were. And it's hard to see a 3.5-year-old buck on your farm in the edge of the pond dead. I mean, it's hard. And I've seen a lot of them over the years in my travels, and people are showing me these deer. But then, we move on to chronic wasting disease. And we start talking about that, and it is different. It's a neurological disease, and it's kind of hard to keep up on all the research going on. It's everywhere. I mean, it's spreading, and it's a concern to me as a deer hunter. I think every deer hunter should be concerned. I personally, I work for the DNR, and I think we're doing it right. We host public meetings when it's found in an area. We talk to our landowners. We talk to our customers. That's one thing I learned very early in my career is listen to your customers. What are your customers asking of you? So if we're listening to our customer base, what do you folks think we should do about this in your area if it pops up? I think that's the start right there, is having public meetings and visiting with people about what's going on with it. I think it's here to stay. Unfortunately, I think it's here to stay. I think EHD's here to stay. It's always been here. It'll probably continue to be here. I think as good stewards of the land, as good deer hunters, as good conservationists, we just have to know those things are out there and do our best.
So I've been to a couple conferences, and there's some people that are proponents of like building these little shallow ponds for habitat for. They have no water source per se. I call them catch ponds.
Sure.
What's your perspective on that? Is that a good practice for habitat? Is that a disease breeding ground for EHD? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just on a farm not too long ago down in the southeast part of my area. And these folks had, I think the previous landowner had built these little, I'd call them just drinking ponds, just little. They took in a little backhoe, or, they did a little sweat equity work and just dug it out, maybe put a liner in it, water in the woods. I have no problem with people doing it, but I also say, if you're going to do it, remember, if we get those dry cycles, they are going to have mud flats, and if we have an EHD outbreak in your area, that could be where deer are congregating. I don't personally think it matters, because if you have a creek or a farm pond in the area and it goes down, you're still going to have the mud flats. I get a lot of questions asked. Should I treat my pond? Should I go spray those mud flats? I don't have that answer. I don't have that kind of knowledge. I don't think it's wrong for people to do that. If they want to go do that, put a little watering area in, that's fine. I think you just have to give them every side of that story,
Sure,
make them aware.
It's a great answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair. So link the drought and the dryness to the EHD for me.
Okay. So when we get, usually in the summer, we start getting dry. our rains kind of dry up, if you've got, a stream running through the farm, if you've got a farm pond, if you've got just a wet area, once that water goes down, this midge or gnat, its life cycle is to live in the mud. Its eggs are laid in the mud and it hatches out. Deer are down there drinking, they get bit. If that gnat or midge has EHD in its body, it can transmit it to the deer. And if they don't have antibodies, they get that high fever. And usually you'll find them by water. I found them. We have a lot of folks when we're checking deer hunters, if they're willing to give us samples for chronic wasting disease. We have a lot of guys say if it was a bad EHD year, they'll find them clear out in the middle of CRP fields. They don't always make it to water. I think it was 12 or 13. I was actually trapping on a stream over near Fairfield. I think one of my sons, I've got two sons, one of them was with me, and we could, early November, we're out in the trees or we're out setting traps or hunting something, and man, you could smell something. And I was down, there was a beaver dam, and this farmer wanted these beavers caught very badly off the farm because they had cut a lot of corn. And,
Sure.
and I was down kind of wading in my waders and had some traps. And I remember it vividly. There were 3 bucks. The beavers had just built the dam in this creek up around these bucks, and here's hard antler coming out. It was bizarre to see.
Wow,
it.
that's crazy.
Yeah, and like a week later, I was trapping a fairly large farm pond in Jefferson County and found 17 deer dead around it.
Oh my gosh.
So you can get those outbreaks. You can, and like I said before, it's not always dry. We can have them, in wet years. We can have those little ephemeral areas that dry up even on our moist years that we have outbreaks. And it makes no sense a lot of times. Well, this part of the county got hit and this part of the county didn't. I saw that in 12 and 13 in Jefferson County where I bow hunt. 6 miles away, good deer population, seeing deer every time we sat, and you'd come to this other place we were hunting, southeast of it, and nothing. You just didn't see deer.
So before we get off this topic, you said about deer sampling for CWD.
Yep.
So I myself, I would love to have probably some of my deer sampled for CWD.
Right.
How would someone go about that? And what do they need to do that?
Right. Reach out to your local wildlife biologist in the county. Reach out to your conservation officer. If you go on our website, there's usually a contact. There's contact information for your local biologist. I'll call them roving crews that go through the counties. Usually it's people from nearby. It might be a DNR wildlife biologist. It might be a conservation officer. It might be a DNR Tech 2, Tech 1. There's crews that move about. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of sampling stations, checkpoints, check stations, stuff like that. But if you want to reach out, they'll come to you. We go to people all the time. They'll say, we got a hanging shed and, we've got 8 does and a couple smaller bucks that our shotgun crew got. Would you like to sample them? We usually sample 1.5 year and older deer. Fawns don't have that. That usually doesn't show up in fawns yet. If you want to reach out, we'll come to you. DNR will come to you.
And the sampling consists of?
Basically, if you've got a really nice deer and you say, man, I'm going to get it mounted, and I don't want you cutting, through the neck, we can work with taxidermist. Maybe you know how to cape out your deer and you're like, hey, if I cape it out, you leave just a few inches of the neck meat, and basically we're going in and getting glands. I would call them, basically tonsils. You're going in and
in the neck.
In the neck and getting those glands. We used to do the brain stem, the cortex, but we don't do that anymore. It's more found in these glands right here. And basically it just takes a few minutes to do it. And we're always happy to get more people helping us out to do that. I know there's always been folks that say, I don't want to help because if you find it, then you're going to do something. And I say it's good to know. I mean, it's really good to know.
Yeah, you want to know.
Yeah, you want to know. And people will come.
Are you also, the state also, are they going through lockers during deer season and taking samples that way? Or is it just pretty much a volunteer?
Some lockers do, some lockers don't. We get a lot of word of mouth. We've been doing it for quite a while now, and a lot of the deer hunters expect us to come. We have crews come in and say, yes, we want you to sample, and some years we lose those crews. But for the most part, everybody I've ever worked with, literally are happy to donate the samples to the DNR to help us find out where this is on the landscape. Literally, I live on the west edge of Fairfield, and I've had guys say, if I bring the tag and tell you where, can I just drop off heads in your driveway and I'll come home some nights from my office? Well, there's some deer heads, so I'll call the Sajima crew. And yeah, it's interesting, but it's something that it's not mandatory, but if we can get people to help us do that, it's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to dwell on this. So what does the state do if there are positive results from the testing?
It's kind of interesting now. We have a website that you can go check. I mean, literally within days that you can tell if we try to run them through very quickly. Most of them go through the lab in the National Health Lab at Ames, right off 35. And it's online now. It never used to be. It used to be, well, geez, I've cut my deer up, or I've taken it to a locker, and maybe I've eaten the loins already. Maybe I don't know. So you can find out fairly quickly now whether your deer tested positive. We usually reach out to and let people know, but you can check online. You can usually put in your harvest number or your hunter number, and it'll be right there if you've had a DNR employee come run that test. So
sure.
Yeah, we've gotten into the 21st century. So yeah.
All right, so I'm going to switch gears now. I've got a couple more questions. I appreciate your patience with us.
Oh, no problem.
So how do I know if the populations of animals on our property is in control? Whether that's, buck to doe ratio, raccoons, predators, game birds.
Okay.
And then what tools are available or what should I do if I don't know, how do I figure that out?
So let's start off with whitetails. And like I say, my disclaimer is I'm not a researcher, but let's say you own 100 acres and you have some doe groups staying on your farm. If you put out trail cameras in food plots or likely spots, creek crossings, whatever, you can probably get a pretty good idea. Okay, I've got, these matriarchal doe groups. I can start to see great grandma, mom, several does, yearlings associated with that. And you see them consistently. There's seven. Okay, so that's a group. And another part of the farm, I might have a trail camera out there on another food plot. There might be intermingling, but that's a good, I'll say it's a cheap way to kind of do a recon on your farm as far as whitetails. Kind of get an idea of where my numbers are. What do I think I should have here? Another way to kind of look at it is I walk through my woods and I think, why are my trees browsed like this? Or I can't keep my 2-acre food plot there for more than, 2 months and it's just gone. If you look at your farm and then you say, what are my neighbors doing? Are they managing for deer? Are they in state? Are they out of state? Do they shoot does? Are they harvesting? Are they quality deer management folk? There's lots of ways you can look at that. Buck to doe ratio. This has always been my thing, and I'm a recreational deer hunter. If I get to shoot a trophy, wonderful. But my sons and I like to eat a lot of deer meat. So we're harvesting does every year for friends and on farms that we hunt. And I always like to say, if you get above a certain level and you're seeing those food plots get a lot lower and you're not able to hold food, it's time to start harvesting. I got a good friend that always says, I want a 1-to-1 ratio. I want my trophy buck and one doe during the rut or during late muzz, and that's all I want. And that makes kind of sense in my head, but it doesn't happen on the land like that. No. So moving on to let's do game birds. Let's say you're a pheasant and quail hunter, and you're doing everything you can. You've planted some winter food plots. You've done a block of switchgrass for that horrible day in January that we get a blizzard. You've managed your grasses and flowers for nesting and bugging and brooding and all these wonderful things. And we get 22 inches of rain in May, right when the pheasants are nesting, or we get a flood in June when the quail are nesting. There's nothing we can do about that as wildlife managers. We're kind of a slave to Mother Nature. But if we do everything we can, managing that landscape, managing that CRP, managing native grasses and flowers and food plots, we should be seeing a tick up in those populations. I think this year, just from my own anecdotal evidence being on the land, I've seen more pheasant broods in June this year than I have the last 3 years. I mean, we weren't dry, but we weren't wet. We didn't have a overly obnoxious winter, so that should have brought more birds into spring. Quail, I'm seeing quail and hearing quail anecdotally everywhere this year. Not seen my first brood, but there's a lot of cover right now.
Sure.
Turkeys, kind of the same thing if we're managing the woods. If we're doing good things for the turkeys out there with food plots, and we get good nesting conditions, Ma Nature's good to us, we get the right conditions, we should see an uptick in those populations.
I apologize for interrupting.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if this is a myth or if it's true, but have you ever heard the saying that, hey, if you have too many turkeys, you're not going to have a lot of pheasants because the turkeys go and break all their eggs? Is that true? Not true?
You're reading my mind. I was just going to ask the same question.
I'm just curious. I mean,
so let me say, if I had $1 for every time I've heard it or asked it, and tell a short story. Probably within the first year and a half I was down here, I went out with a private consulting forester. He was actually stationed in my office, and he said, "You want to go meet with a landowner with me just to get out?" Because I didn't know a lot of folks. My name wasn't out. I said, "Yeah." So we go down to an unnamed county in southern Iowa.
Sure.
And this gentleman was talking about planting trees and doing all these things. Nice older gentleman. And he looks over at me and looks at my shirt. "Oh, you're with the DNR?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm a wildlife biologist on private lands." And he goes, "What are you going to do about the turkeys eating all the baby quail?" And I think my jaw kind of hit the gravel road we were standing on. I was like, "What?" It kind of shocked me. I'd never heard anything. I thought, well, this must be a rural legend or myth or something. And I started to hear it more and more and more. I reach out to our upland game biologist and I'm like, "Is this happening?" And he's like, "No." He said that, it's not happening. They've actually done studies in Florida where they've actually monitored bobwhite quail and turkeys in a I think it was maybe a high fence operation or something. And they have trail camera pictures of turkey and quail. I mean, broods of quail walking, down the same path and ignoring one another. I'm not going to sit here as a wildlife biologist and say that a turkey wouldn't go, "Oh, what's that?" And maybe peck at it, but it's not even in my top 100 as to why our turkey populations are maybe not where they once were. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought we needed to clear that air. I hear it all the time.
Yeah, I hear it all the time too, and it doesn't make any sense to me. What I heard was not so much eating the small birds, but breaking the eggs of pheasants. I'm assuming competition.
I can tell you anecdotally that I hunt turkeys as much as I can in the spring, when time allows. And I hear bobwhite quail and pheasant, if we've got CRP, good managed native grasses and flowers, and that interface, the turkeys are using it. They'll nest it in as well. And these guys are like, we have very strong pheasant and quail populations, and our turkeys are doing well on these farms also. So I don't put much credence in it.
Well, I've got a suggestion for the state as far as managing habitat, and that's putting a bounty out on raccoons, because I've got raccoons up the wazoo.
Yeah.
So
this year is just driving over here 45, 50 minutes from Fairfield, probably counted conservatively 100 dead coon, young coon. I take that right back to almost no fur market, no value in raccoons right now. The whole thing going on in the world and not being able to hold, fur auctions. And it's probably at an all-time low. I've trapped since I've been, knee-high to the grasshopper, and I've never seen it this low. But that doesn't stop the tried and true, I'll call them crazy trappers. I'm one of them, But I never get to every farm that I've secured permission on. You just don't have the time. Yeah. But there's a lot. I agree. There's a lot of raccoon, a lot of possum. I'd love to be able to get more kids out. That's where it all starts. I was lucky. Everybody trapped when I was a kid. Uncles, cousins, both of my granddads, my dad. And I wish we could get more. Money's fine. The money is fine. If you get something for the pelt, fine. But it's that experience. I'll leave you with this on trapping. My grandpa Gerald Goodwin told me as a kid, I said, why do you like trapping? And he was a big fox hunter. He liked to go walk up fox in sections, just take a 22 or a 22 mag or a shotgun with BBs and go walk. He said, I'm going to go one-on-one, with that fox. But I'd always say, why do you like trapping so much? And he said, it's just like Christmas morning. He said, it's just like Christmas morning. You don't know what you're going to get when you walk up on that next trap. It's like a package. It's like a gift. That stuck in my head for years. So,
yeah, cool approach.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple more questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
So what does a and I don't even know if it's possible, what's a landowner have to do in order to get mature deer to stay on their property, whether it be 50 or 100 acres? And is it even possible?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a great question. Full disclosure, Tim gave me some questions beforehand to look at, which I loved. I'm like, these are good questions. And I thought about that one on the drive over. Luckily, with a lot of people wouldn't look at this as luck, but when I drive, I get to think, and that can be probably dangerous. A lot of my friends will tell you that if Kevin's thinking a lot. But I thought about that question, and I think about, I've never went back and calculated all the acres and the average size. But I'm guessing it's not as big as I think. It might be 40, 60, 80 acres. Most people, when they're buying farms, don't buy a 500-acre farm when they first start off. Maybe they work up to it. Maybe they never do. But that's an excellent question, because I think I've hunted personally on 10-acre farms that deer just stream into because of the lay of the land. Transitioning from bedding area to maybe a feeding area, and you're in the pinch point, and all it has to be is that 10 acres, and you're in a great spot. You can get to the stand, you can hunt it. Putting out food plots is an excellent way to, I'll say, attract deer to the farm. To hold them, maybe. I used to do this, and I still do this to this day. I would ask the landowner, what's the township section or range that your farm's in, so I can print off a map, unless you have maps. And I zero in on the farm. I'll zoom in on the farm, the 40, 60, 80, 100 acres. And then I used to bring a 2-mile map and then a 5-mile map, and we start looking, what's around you? Do you know what your neighbors do? Maybe you're new. Maybe you don't know what the neighbor's doing. Maybe you don't. Maybe you got a buddy that lives next door. I've been in that situation a lot. Maybe he's got the bedding and you've got the food. Something like that. I think it's possible to hold deer, but knowing deer behavior, like you guys do, you hunt. A lot of us, that are listening and watching hunt. I think that the deer come to the farm. They may leave the farm. The bucks expand their range during the rut, so that buck you may be targeting may be 5 miles away, and that's his summer range. But you hold those because you've got 50 acres of native grass, and you've done timber stand improvement, or Joel's done edge feathering and timber burning, and it may become that we've tweaked our farm enough to bring those deer to us. Maybe they don't live here, but maybe they come here for many reasons. So
that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it like that.
So getting past the tipping point of whatever it is that deer or that herd needs.
Yeah. I really like the idea of looking at not just your farm, but what's around you. You have no control probably over what's around you, but if you're doing something different or special or trying new things, maybe a new food plot mix every year, found out that one really works. Maybe I'm double cropping my food plots. Maybe I've burned, and in 3 or 4 or 5 years I visit with Kevin or the forester.
Double cropping. What do you mean by that?
Double cropping a food plot. So, boy, in my wheelhouse.
That wasn't on the list, by the way. Right? That was not on the list.
Yeah, double crop. No, that wasn't on the list, but double cropping. I kind of fell in love with this a few years back. So let's say we've planted soybeans. I noticed maybe
I have soybeans out here.
Joel has soybeans out here this year. I was kind of, looking out there this morning as I walked in, kind of drooling a little bit because Joel's got soybeans. But let's say I do soybeans and I have high deer browse, and I'm looking at it in August, and I think, man, on the edges of my food plot next to the woods, next to the cover, maybe I've edge feathered, and those deer are living right there, and they're just pounding those edges. Geez, I want there to be food there. I want there to be maybe food there to observe deer, to arrow deer, to shoot deer during the season. Maybe I want to have food from May through the next May. Maybe I say, do I need to put a clover ring around this? But getting back to double cropping, if my soybeans are down to 6 inches or 5 inches around the edge or down through the middle, or maybe my plot's just decimated, maybe in August I'm going back in with a winter pea, an annual clover, an oat or a wheat or a rye, maybe some annual clovers like crimson clover, things like that. Because I know, geez, it's hot in August, but it's going to get cooler in September and then October. So I've done one crop in the spring. I'm going to do another crop later on in the summer. Maybe I just say I'm just going to do something simple like purple tops, or maybe a 10-way mix, maybe a kitchen sink mix or something like that. Or maybe I've went in with a really cool cover crop mix in the spring with oats and clovers and annual things like that. And maybe I have the equipment. Maybe I have a tiller, a disc, maybe I have a no-till drill. And late July through late August, I can go back in and I can plant a fall or a winter mix. So double cropping to me, if you're in a high or even a medium deer population area, you can go back in, and that goes right back to soils and protecting the soil and keeping living roots in the soil year round, which is always really important to me. Since we talked about soils earlier and the health of soils, if I can keep something growing there, I'm going to probably keep more wildlife on my farm. Even if it's on a 1, 2, 3, 4 acre food plot, the more of a diversity. I always equate it to us three going out for lunch right now and going to a buffet. And you guys are grabbing potatoes and gravy and roast beef and chicken, and I'm over there picking at the salads, But I'm still going to go back and grab other things. I think if we give those whitetails multiple things to nibble on, it's a good thing.
I don't know what he means by you and I.
I think it should have been us with the salads, right? Yeah. Come on, Kevin.
Maybe I should back up.
I think it's very apropos.
Oh,
very
okay.
apropos.
Okay.
So I do have one other question.
Sure.
So we've been talking a lot about deer, whitetail, turkeys, etc.
Yep.
Can a person with, say, 50 to 100 acres build out a food plot for, let's say, dove?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So doves have been a seasons for Iowa, 2011, somewhere around there.
Yep.
And I have doves. I have a plethora of doves. But, gosh, 100 acres really is not that a lot, or 50 acres isn't a lot.
Right.
If I go out and hunt those doves in September, am I going to ruin my hunting in October? What's your read on something like that?
From my personal experience, I've helped folks do dove plots since about 12 or 13. One of my friends put in his first dove plot in 11. We got together, and it came in kind of late in 11 that we were going to get a season in September. September 1 is when our dove season opens nationwide and in Iowa. And he decided to do sunflowers, and Missouri's been doing it for years and years, and it's a steep learning curve to start doing these sunflowers and these dove plots. And I'll never forget, he had cocklebur as high as the sunflowers. And he asked me specifically, he's been a friend for 20 years. He's like, I got an 80, I got 40 of CRP, and I can have a food plot. I've got my timber back here where I hunt deer, bow hunt and gun hunt in the fall and winter. And it was like this, am I going to screw anything up? And I said, well, we hunt doves pretty much in September. We can hunt them, a few of them, because they're migratory. We hunt a few of them in October. But to me, our whitetails down in this part of the state, probably statewide, hear guns going off and loud noises. And as long as it's not right next to a bedding area or something like that, I hunt on a farm. Some good friends of mine let me kind of have their farm as a playground, and they grant me permission to come out and try new food plots. And it's fun. I really love doing it, and they're great folks. We've hunted doves there since 12 or 13, and I go in and start bow hunting, whether it's early muzz, whether it's third, fourth week of that pre-rut, that buck up on the feet moving with a cold front in October, and I've never seen that impact deer hunting. I've never seen it impact deer hunting. I'm not saying it couldn't, but if you say, man, I'd really love to try dove hunting. I've done it on public lands, which is awesome. I'd like to have a 1 acre plot out here to invite my friends and family down, and we get 2 or 3 good hunts. Maybe we hunt opener, maybe we hunt a week later, maybe we hunt the 15th of September and we're done. I'll take you right back to double cropping. If I've got a dove plot, and basically we plant them We nurture them, we fertilize them, we put down some weed control, we mow them off. We maybe leave a few standing to sit in as our hidey hole to hunt the doves. What happens after you mow them down? I get that question a lot. Geez, Kevin, what do I do? What about winter wheat? What about winter rye? What about some annual clovers? There's my double crop. So I go right back to that.
Awesome. All right. So last question on that one for your subject is best food plots for dove.
Hands down for me, it's sunflowers. Hands down. They love them. I think, this is me saying this, but I think they scout them. I think doves are out literally flying around. People look at me kind of funny when I say that, and they're like, why do you say that? And I said, well, think about doves before we were here. I mean, what did they eat? They ate native seeds. There weren't the weedy species here before we got here. Sure. They came over in seeds from Europe. That's how we got a foxtail, a ragweed, whatever. But I think they fed on our native sunflowers, Maximilian sunflowers, things like that. So I think it might be ingrained in a dove's DNA to kind of scout around and look for those things. Bare ground is vitally important. So if you can keep weeds down, if you can't keep the weeds down, go ahead and mow it down, a week, 10 days ahead of the season, get that seed on the ground. Doves love bare ground. They love it. You see them along the gravel roads, picking foxtail later, picking their grit. If you can keep it clean, but if you can't, if you got a little tiller or a small disc and you can create some bare soil or just some soil, you'll have doves. Probably my second choice would be winter wheat, which is, we just double cropped last year, and this is going to be my dove plot for 2021. Maybe I put in winter wheat. 2 years ago, we couldn't get dove plots in because of 18 inches of rain in May. So I said, well, there's my de facto dove plot with winter wheat. I just go in and mow that down late August, and I'm hunting doves on it. So.
And winter wheat will grow in the back of your pickup, that stuff. You
put it on concrete. Yeah, you could do rye. You could do spring barley if you had to. Millets are always good.
Milo?
Millets.
Okay.
Millets. Look at your, I'll say, cheap bird food at a store, at a big box store, like your just stuff you put in your bird feeder. They'll be like proso millet. It's the tiny white seed. Real easy to grow. 60 days, 70 days to maturity. So if you get caught in that time where, I didn't get my sunflowers planted in May and it's mid-June, can I still plant millet? Absolutely. Wow. So there's always an option. But sunflowers, number one, it'd probably be a toss-up between winter wheat, winter rye, and then your millets. So
Milo's a fairly robust. What would you plant Milo for my habitat for here in Iowa if I was to plant something like that?
I love grain sorghum. I love Egyptian wheat, which is just a taller grain sorghum, the forage sorghums. I like to plant a mix of that when I plant it, when I prescribe that for my customers, simply because if I have different heights, believe it or not, it's a sleeper food plot, grain sorghum or Milo for white-tailed deer. When they find it, once they realize what it is, I've actually personally planted it on 2 or 3 acres and go in and check trail cameras in October. You're out there looking and you come back a week later, and when they've found it, you walk into the plot, maybe you've got a camera hung and you're like, something's different. The heads are all gone. Once they find it, they eat it. It's a really good food plot for pheasant and quail. It's a really good food plot for songbirds. Once it starts hitting the ground, turkeys will gobble it up. It's multi-purpose. It's kind of finicky. It's a grass, so it's like a corn. It takes a lot of nutrient out of the soil. I don't ever do it 2 years in a row because it strips the soil of a lot of nutrient. It likes its nitrogen, but it's great in a rotation. I've put strips just around the edges of food plots with it. And like I said, once the deer, kind of like if you've ever planted turnips and you go, wow, the deer didn't eat them on my farm. But you wait till next year, and they do. Once they figure out sorghum, they will eat it. So.
All right. Do you have any other questions?
I think I've covered the list. The only question that I've got, and I know we have, is the surprise question for every guest, right?
Yeah.
In closing?
Yeah.
So I'll leave that up to you, Tim.
So, in all your years of hunting, you have a dumbass moment that you can think of that's kind of funny in nature that would be entertaining for our listeners, but you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. Geez. Oh, boy. There's so many. I think we all go through that. Simple ones like I'm going duck hunting and I forgot to throw in the decoys, or you get in the duck boat and you don't have a box of shells, or something. Oh, I was dove hunting and now I have lead shot with me, something silly like that. So over the years I've kind of become, I will say, very persnickety about making my list the night before, because otherwise I'll forget stuff, right? What am I not bringing? But I would say probably for me it was I tried to have 2 sons. I tried to bring my sons up doing everything. I mean, they were involved in sports, music, band, choir, everything, speech. But I wanted them to know the outdoors, because I got to know the outdoors. And they were city-raised boys, so they didn't get the scooping manure out of barns and those wonderful experiences. So I thought, I'm going to raise them camping and fishing and hunting and trapping. So I remember taking my oldest son, Wyatt. Dakota was probably doing something else, but I remember taking Wyatt duck hunting one morning. It was a Saturday morning. It was an opener. And we got halfway out to this pond. We have this little 2-man bass boat that we've got rigged up with a little blind. And it was more about getting him out, getting him that experience of hearing the whistle of the wings and the duck calls and hearing him try to call ducks and ooh, And we get halfway out there. And he's young enough, he doesn't need a license. He's with Dad, and he doesn't need the state and federal waterfowl stamps. And I have my state stamp, and we get halfway out there, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, did you buy your federal waterfowl stamp this year?" Oh, crap. So we turn around, and we drive back in, and we wait for the post office, the federal post office, to open. Well, that hunt was over. But we went out Sunday morning. So that kind of followed suit. He goes, and I usually, the day we can get them in August, whenever they become available, I usually go to the post office in Fairfield and grab my federal waterfowl
Good catch by your son.
Yeah, I owe him a lot. I owe him a lot for that one. Yeah. I always say, take care of me when I get old and remind me if I don't have the proper stamps and tags.
That's funny.
So, yeah, that's probably one of my top ones.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Kevin.
You're welcome.
This has been awesome. We'd love to have you back.
Yeah,
anytime,
I don't think we even hit the tip of the iceberg, it feels like, on this.
Absolutely. So. I appreciate you guys inviting me. I love what you guys are doing. I think this is really good. So thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. So if people did want to get a hold of you or their area biologist or any support, we've been talking about support on the whole podcast,
right? What's
the source of information? How can people get a hold of you specifically or their DNR support?
Right. Go to the DNR website. Should be under private land, wildlife, and under private lands. We're all listed. There should be a map. There should be contact information, whether it be email, whether it be our cell phone numbers. Real easy to find us. If you can't find that information on the website, if you go into an NRCS office, if you're in there doing something with CRP, say, well, who's your private lands biologist? Who's your Pheasants Forever biologist? Reach out to them. But if you go to the DNR website, we're pretty much all listed. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I think this concludes our episode. And for all our listeners, as we always end our podcast, be safe, have fun, and get outdoors.
Amen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening or watching our show. We have some exciting topics and guests coming up.
We ask that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
We look forward to hearing your suggestions for topics,
questions, and comments. This is Two Dumbasses signing off. Until next time,
be safe,
have fun, and get outdoors.